You could accept the fact that this city is headed for a disaster of biblical proportions. It was ways and Old Testament. Wrath of God types. Fire, brimstone, rivers, seas, water, living together, that's terrible.
Some 35 years after Tim Burton's Batman debuted, there are two ways to regard the late 20th century comic book movie. The first is to view it in comparison to the dozen or so Batman live action appearances that followed the movie's footsteps, or consider its place as one of the first truly successful comic book film adaptations. Batman stands on its own through either lens because its filmmakers pioneered a rare approach that modern Batman and superhero adaptations rarely use. There's no such thing as objectivity when it comes to critiquing art, but those who were around for Batman's marketing and release can't view it without the bias of Batmania. The movie broke all sorts of records when it came to budget or usage of studio space at Pinewood Studios, home to many big productions before and since. To promote it, posters and key art showing nothing but the oval Batman logo were used. Batman was always popular, but his symbol wasn't as iconic and revered as it is today. Once more, Batman himself wasn't all that respected before the 1989 movie. And there was an outcry over Tim Burton casting Michael Keaton, known then for Mr. Mom and Beetlejuice. Jack Nicholson was one of the biggest and most respectable stars at the time, who, along with Jack Palance and Billy D. Williams, gave the movie and their respective characters an air of credibility that the comics often lacked. Most importantly, Batman at the time was best known as Adam West, the bright knight who starred in the campy TV series from the 1960s. Tim Burton's Batman was the perfect marriage of all these things and the most integral force behind the Dark Knight's drastic change in the public eye. But Tim Burton's Batman made the Caped Crusader nothing more than Bruce Wayne's mask. This is because in Batman, at least in the comics and most recent films, Batman is almost always portrayed as the paragon of justice, while Bruce Wayne was his mask. Batman pretended to be a disgustingly carefree billionaire who drank too much to deflect suspicion about his nocturnal crusade against crime and evil. In brief, Batman was a walking symbol. Batman, 1989, on the other hand, had something else in mind. Here, Keaton also portrayed Bruce as a scattered brain playboy. Sure, he's smarter and more serious than he puts on, but he was always awkward when it came to interacting with people outside his role as the Dark Knight. Keaton's Batman was also a fearsome crusader, but he was notably more human than other portrayals. Unlike other Batman stories, this movie depicted Batman and Bruce as being one and the same. Both seemed lost when it came to doing things that didn't involve crime or vengeance. Batman was literally just a mask that Bruce put on, not something grander than him or beyond human. Nowhere was this made more clear than in the relationship with the journalist Vicky Vale. Bruce's date with Vicky began before there was even a real connection. This was most noticeable when they dined with Alfred in the kitchen. The fact that so many fans thought that Alfred revealed Bruce's secret to Vicky has to be chalked up to subconscious misogyny. What? The movie made it clear from the moment Vicky started tailing Bruce that she at least suspected there was more to him and his cheap lie to get out of a second date. So, but after one night sleeping together, Vicky woke up to see him literally hanging upside down like a bat. Bruce went to her apartment after the museum incident to tell her his secret. Comic fans felt this was a poor characterization, but in fact, it showed how important Vicky was to Bruce after just one date. After all, when Batman went to rescue her, he spent most of that sequence running from Joker's goons to prioritize her safety. He only fought them as a last resort when he and Vicky were cornered. Batman actually solves a crime in this movie too. Instead of just punching supervillains, he gave Vicky the information about the Joker's planned mass murder through hygiene products as a cover for bringing her to the Batcave. Woo! What was that? Okay. Crazy. All right. Anyways, so Vicky is far more important of a person to Bruce and Batman than just some damsel in distress that they saved. Jack Nicholson's Joker was great precisely because he deviated so much from the comics. The late, great Heath Ledger's Joker in The Dark Knight is considered by many to be the best take on the character. And it's a fair argument all around. However, it could be argued that Ledger's Joker was more of an ideologue than a character. He was really more the walking embodiment of chaos than a fleshed out supervillain. Conversely, Jack Nicholson's Joker, aka Jack Napier, genuinely saw himself as the world's first fully functional homicidal artist. This gave the 1989 Joker a sensible motivation, relatively speaking, for his campaign of terror across Gotham City and his lack of discernible criminal goals, like money or power. In 1989, the Joker's schemes were nothing more than just, as he calls it, an artistic expression. Even the moments where the Joker seemingly wanted to control Gotham's criminal underworld were part of the performance. He literally wore a mask of his own, specifically his flesh-colored makeup, for his deadly theatrics. The money he hoarded and stole was used as a grant to fund his art, not finance illegal enterprises. These were just some of the many overt parallels Jack Joker had to Bruce Batman. It should be noted that none of these details and motives were faithful to the comics, and the Joker was better for it. Because this was such an early comic book film, the filmmakers weren't so hung up on the lore or being faithful to the comic books. After all, DC only got their continuity in order just 3 years earlier with the Crisis on Infinite Earths miniseries. Back in these days, comics were not the sacred text that modern fans think they are today. In the comics, the Joker's backstory was deliberately a mystery. The Killing Joke was only just being released, while this film was in production, after all. It wouldn't be until decades later that Alan Moore's now iconic but infamous one-shot was treated as Joker's most likely canonical origin. The filmmakers needed to give this villain a backstory that wasn't available in source material. Seeing the Joker as a blank slate, they chose cinematic symmetry over established comic book lore. Besides being Bruce and Batman's dark foil, this Joker was the one who killed his parents and basically created Batman. Batman's line, "I made you, you made me first," summed up what Burton and company went for when they made their own clown prince of crime. Batman opened with a couple trying to catch a cab, only to end up being robbed. And this invoked the Wayne's death. And hilariously, Batman doesn't stop the assault. He only noticed something was wrong when he heard the woman's screams as he loomed atop of one of Gotham's towers. In fact, the movie treated the murder of Bruce Wayne's parents as something of a surprise. The addition of Jack being the shooter seems like something added to surprise comic fans who already knew that canonically it was Joe Chill who pulled the trigger. This may seem odd in today's superhero-obsessed landscape, but back in 1989, only dedicated readers even knew who Joe Chill even was. From the moment Bruce hooked up with Vicky, the revelation about his parents unfolded. Vicky followed him, but instead of catching him in the act as Batman, she saw him pay his respects to the site of their murder. This was something she didn't realize until Alexander Knox pulled up the article about the Wayne's death in the newspaper archives. Unlike modern films, the Wayne's deaths weren't as well known among Gotham's citizens, and by extension, audiences. Bruce was well and truly a mystery. The scene in which Vicky shows up in the Batcave can feel a bit contrived today, but it still works because it happens right after the audience saw the deaths of Bruce's parents for the first time. In later films, Batman was Bruce's mission or quest, and it dominated his life. But in Batman 1989, being Batman was just Bruce's job. While he does it partly because of what happened to his parents, he's not obsessed over it. Alfred has to bring him the file on his parents' murder, implying that it's not always at hand. Joker's mocking reaction to Batman accusing him of killing his parents is another instance where the movie suggests that Batman's cowl only works as far as someone hasn't had FaceTime with Bruce. Bruce wanted to have a life off the clock, which is where Vicky comes in. When he directly faces his parents' murderer, she's there to pull him back from falling into full obsession and being consumed by hate. As far as Keaton's casting, many were nervous about it, but in the end, the performances and the promise of a dark live-action Batman grabbed would-be audiences. But it was the world created by Tim Burton and the crew that really sold the film. In truth, Batman 1989 and its characters would have come across as shallow if it weren't for the setting in the real world that had some form of grounded reality. Burton did what few comic book filmmakers before or since have done. He embraced comics' inherent artifice to make clear that Gotham City was a world of unreality. Burton himself said that he considered Gotham City to be a parallel universe. He used stylized sets to clearly distinguish his Gothic city from the one seen in reality. As luck would have it, the Art Deco designs blended with the clear and then contemporary 80s era cars and cameras. Even the Prince songs used for the soundtrack didn't date the movie and instead added to the timelessness of the old style architecture, newspaper offices, and other bits of technology. Batman debuted in 1989, but it could very well have been set in any other time period. Unlike succeeding Batman filmmakers like Nolan, Matt Reeves, or even Zack Snyder, Burton made it clear that his vision for the Caped Crusader was an alien one, where anything was possible. Unlike successive films, Batman 1989, this final battle wasn't a fight for Gotham City itself or something as abstract as people's capacity for good. No, Batman merely had to rescue Vicky from the Joker and his goons from the top of a bell tower. Deeper meanings and social parallels could be taken from the movie's characters and fights, and of course, but Batman and Joker's fight was a personal feud above all else. Theirs was a selfish and myopic vendetta that could only exist and make sense in the heightened world of comics and superheroes. When the police turned on the searchlights, it even looked as if their beams were two-dimension animation cells, again adding a subtle level of comic book unreality. When Batman showed up in the Batwing, audiences never questioned its existence, nor did it seem implausible that the Joker shot it down with a comically long-barreled revolver. In its own ways, the dark Batman 1989 honored the campy roots of the 1960s series in ways that future Batman movies never attempted. For those watching Tim Burton's Batman for the first time here in 2024, even with the knowledge of the older Batman films, the reality is it still works. It truly is a comic book movie. Those living in a world don't follow the rules of the real world, and they're better for it. There is an unashamed sense of fun, even when Batman clearly kills people. Batman is the perfect blend of taking the story seriously and embracing the surreal possibilities of fantasy. This adaptation of Batman 1989 is truly a comic book that came to life. And of course, it would be unfortunate if I didn't say what is quite possibly the best line in the whole film. Now you want to get nuts? Come on! Let's get nuts. Broadcasting live from the WDCE studios out of the University of Richmond, you're listening to 90.1 FM. From the most trusted puppet in media, reporting since Roswell, I'm Sam NewsMan. And this is Saturday morning.